Saying a movie is based on a true story has got to be one of the biggest, most bold-faced lies that Hollywood tells us on a regular basis. They do it because they think that if it's real, it's going to be automatically more scary. But if you've watched any of the movies that claim to be based on a true story, it's pretty easy to tell, this might be a little bit of a stretch as to what actually happened. But what happens when the opposite is true? And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Those movies that production and the story around them turn into their own kind of horror movies, those cursed movies. A great place to start when it comes to talking about cursed movies is 1994's The Crow, starring Brandon Lee. Now, from the very beginning of the production of this movie, there were some really ominous things going on. To start off with some voicemails that were getting left for the people who were making the movie, stating that really bad things were going to happen if they continued to move forward with making this picture. Now, there are a couple of things that happened on the set of The Crow that really back up the idea of it being cursed. First off, something that can happen really on any movie. There was a hurricane that came through, destroyed a bunch of sets, delayed the movie. That's not too crazy. But then there starts to be, some accidents that happened. Like at one point, an electrician was using a cherry picker and he accidentally backed up into the high tension wire of the power lines, and he was electrocuted. He got shocked so bad that he had to go to the hospital and get treated for second, third degree burns that were actually so bad that he ended up having to have his ears removed. So obviously not a great start, but all of these things kind of fall to the background when a death happens on a set. And The Crow is one of the most famous movies to have a death happen because the star of the film, Brandon Lee, was accidentally shot during the production of the film. You see, what happened is at one point earlier in the filming, a dummy bullet was inside of the gun and the tip of it had kind of got stuck in there. And then later on in the film, they were using the same gun. They didn't check it properly. And so when they used a blank in that same gun later on during filming, it launched that dummy bullet out when they fired the blank, going into Brandon Lee at the same speed a regular bullet would have, and eventually leading him to die in the hospital just a little bit later on. It's kind of really similar to that whole situation that's going on with that movie Rust that Alec Baldwin is involved in. So sadly, Hollywood continues to not learn lessons when these kind of tragedies happen. The death of Brandon Lee on the set of The Crow is considered even more ominous because of the family curse that there is kind of believed to be on the Lee family because his father, legendary martial artist Bruce Lee, also died under mysterious circumstances. Now, it isn't always a death that can lead to a movie being considered cursed. Sometimes it can be, the topic of the film itself. The Passion of the Christ is a movie that talks about, the end of Jesus's life and his crucifixion. And this is considered a cursed movie among some people. Why is that? Well, of course, talking about Jesus, talking about his death and all of that, being religious at all can make some people uneasy. And then you stack on top of that the fact that the guy that played Jesus got struck by lightning, got hypothermia, pneumonia. He dislocated a shoulder at one point in the filming. And then during the scene where he is getting flogged as Jesus before the crucifixion, he's actually got whipped himself and hurt. Now, can you just kind of write these off as to careless filmmakers and making bad decisions that are leading to this guy getting hurt all the time? Yeah, I think you probably could. But if you choose to be superstitious, you might also think, it could be a curse. So if movies about Jesus can be cursed, definitely we could say that movies about the devil could be cursed as well. The Exorcist is one of those movies that has definitely got a reputation for having some crazy things going on while they're making it. During filming, they had a set completely burnt to the ground. An investigation was done. And they could find no reason as to why that fire would have started. We have actors who died during the production of the movie, like Jack McGowan, though his death is not actually connected to the movie. He died of the flu, which was going around London at the time. But then on the set of The Exorcist, there were also some accidents that happened, while stunts were being performed. Now, both female leads of the movie, Elaine Burstyn and Linda Blair, both suffered really kind of life-altering injuries during the filming of the movie. Let's take a look at Linda Blair's incident first, where she is, strapped into this kind of vest and she's being whipped back and forth during her possession. Now, just watching this stunt happen, you can tell this would be very uncomfortable, very easy to get whiplash, in this kind of a situation. But the thing that went wrong with this stunt is that, the way she was tied in wasn't right. So she wasn't in there tight enough. And so she slipped out and it caused some back injuries to her that, still kind of plague her to this day. During another stunt, Elaine Burstyn, who played Chris, the mother of Reagan, was supposed to get pulled across the room. They did the stunt once. It was very uncomfortable for her, and she told them not to yank her that hard again. The director, William Friedkin, instead looked at the stunt coordinator and said, yank her as hard as you can. And probably in the most messed up part of that whole situation, both of the shots where the women were injured are the shots that ended up in the movie. Just like I mentioned on The Passion of the Christ, a lot of these things can be chalked up to just, bad filmmakers making bad decisions. The reaction to The Exorcist probably led to it being considered cursed, almost even more so than the actual filming and the things that happened on the set. I mean, just looking at this news footage from its release, it's easy to see that, it wouldn't be hard for people to believe that this movie was actually haunted. Movies featuring the devil or his kids remain very popular when it comes to looking at curses in Hollywood. And probably no movie in that subgenre has been considered cursed more than The Omen. During the production of the movie, there were 4 different occasions where airplanes were struck by lightning. That's not unusual for it to happen, once, right? Planes get struck by lightning on a pretty regular basis. But for it to happen on so many occasions started to make some people uneasy. There was another situation with an airplane where the cast was meant to fly to a kind of a remote destination to be filming the next day, but because of delays, they weren't able to actually get on the flight that they were supposed to. And then later they found out that the flight they were going to be on actually crashed after it ran into a flock of birds and it killed everybody on board. But the weird situations didn't stop there. There were a lot of problems with animals on the set of this movie. The dogs that had been trained like their entire lives to be in film and follow instructions would be attacking their trainers and seriously injuring, a stuntman on the film. There's a part in the movie where the family goes to a animal park and they get attacked by baboons. And according to everybody that was on set that day, there wasn't much acting that was happening because they were legitimately being, attacked by those little apes. And then, though it is a bit of a stretch to say this is connected to the movie, the day after the film was at that game park, a lion would go on to kill a zookeeper. Unfortunately, The Omen would also have a death associated with it, in which a car accident would take the life of Liz Moore, who served as an assistant to John Richardson, the special effects designer on the film. She died on Friday the 13th of August, 1976, so automatically that's going to be having people getting a little freaked out. But the manner of her death in the car accident was also very strangely related to the movie in that she was killed in a way that was very reminiscent to a death that happened in the film when she was decapitated. Now, it isn't always horror movies, though, that are considered cursed. Sometimes it can be some of the most wholesome movies that you've ever heard of, like The Wizard of Oz. For literal generations, people talked about how there was a dead munchkin in the background of a shot. But later on, as we would get higher resolution images of the movie, we would come to find out it's actually just a big bird in the background. And so that kind of, washed that away. But that doesn't change the fact that there were a lot of messed up things that happened on the set of this movie. For starters, the guy who was originally cast to play the Tin Man, Buddy Ebsen, was pretty much poisoned by the makeup department. What they did is they put pure aluminum dust on him to make him look like he was made out of metal. And because of that, he was breathing in that stuff all the time, and he had to be hospitalized after just 9 days of filming. Now, when they were getting the makeup ready for Jack Haley, his replacement, they did mix the aluminum powder into a paste, so he wasn't breathing it in as much, but it did still lead to him getting infections, specifically around his eyes, though those were treatable just with some medication. There was an incident where they accidentally lit Margaret Hamilton, the woman who played the Wicked Witch of the West, on fire. And then they had to panic and run in and remove the makeup off of her because there was copper in it. And if it got into the wounds that were caused by the fire, it would have, become toxic and potentially killed her too. And then probably worst of all, to some of you out there, the dog that played Toto got jumped on by accident by one of the guards of the Wicked Witch. I'm happy to report to you, though, that Terry, the dog who played Toto, did have a full recovery, though she did have to have a double stand-in for her over the few weeks that she was recovering. You see, you're starting to get the idea here where it's not just one bad thing happening on a set that makes it be a cursed film. It's a bunch of bad things happening continually over and over and over again that just put this dread over the whole production. But sometimes it's not just one movie that gets cursed, it's an entire series. And in my opinion, one of the biggest examples of this is the movie Poltergeist that came out in 1982. Now, more so than any of the other movies, I think that, if you really wanted to think like, could this be cursed? This one definitely has an argument that could have you feeling like, yeah, sure, maybe. It all ties into one big scene that happens in the movie where the mom, played by JoBeth Williams, falls into the swimming pool at her house that is haunted, and then skeletons, come up in the pool, and she's like trying to get away from them. It's a scary scene, but you're like, oh, whatever. The thing is, though, reports say that those skeletons were all actually real because producer Steven Spielberg wanted to have real ones instead of fake ones because it was a lot cheaper to have that happen. So when you start messing with dead bodies, some people will be pretty inclined to think like, some bad things could be happening. Now, unfortunately, some really bad things did happen to some of the cast of Poltergeist, and it started really soon after the completion of the movie when Dominique Dunne, who played the oldest daughter, Dana, in the movie, was actually murdered by her ex-boyfriend in her own front yard when she wouldn't take him back. Her ex, John Sweeney, would be sentenced to only 6.5 years for the killing, but then would be released after only serving 3 years and 7 months. And unfortunately, that wasn't the only tragedy that befell the cast of Poltergeist. Heather O'Rourke, who played Carol Ann, the little girl in the first movie, would die very early on in life as well. In fact, she was only 12 years old when she would die. When she was really young, she was misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease, and this would lead to a bunch of complications and mistakes made by doctors, which would eventually lead to her dying while having surgery that was trying to correct a bowel obstruction. It's so sad, not only because she died so young, but because it would have been so preventable if the doctors would have actually caught what was going on. I specifically remember seeing like an True Hollywood story about the curse of the Poltergeist movies. And there's a whole bunch of other things that happened on set, a lot smaller than these two things that happened, but there must have been something going on that was kind of behind all these bad things that were going on during the making of these movies. And then all of that brings us to the Twilight Zone, which had one of the worst accidents that was ever involved in filming a movie here in the United States. In the Twilight Zone movie, there's a number of different segments that get covered. And the segment that we are talking about today is called Time Out, and it was directed by John Landis. Now, this segment is about a guy who's a racist, and he goes back in time and lives the life of a number of different oppressed people at different points in history. And at one point in this kind of journey that he goes on, he ends up in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And in the original script, what was supposed to happen is he was supposed to be rescuing these two children and running as this helicopter was flying over and exploding. And it was this big spectacle that was supposed to be going on. But unfortunately, on July 23rd, 1982, things went disastrously wrong. And the main actor, Vic Morrow, and two child actors, Micah Din Lee and Renee Shin Yi Chin, were killed when the helicopter that was flying above them crashed and crushed all three of them. Now, this would be a tragedy no matter what, but the real problem with this is that there were so many rules that were being broken when this happened that it should not have happened at all. For starters, the helicopter was doing things it shouldn't have been doing. It was too low and close to people, and there were too many things in the way where it just wasn't safe for it to be flying. Second, and probably most egregious, is the fact that these child actors should not have even have been involved at this point in time at all. There are very strict rules when it comes to working with kids on movies, and they were not following any of those rules, having these kids be involved right now. And they knew they were breaking those rules because they were paying these parents under the table, and they were lying to the parents of the kids as to what was actually going to be going on. They told them there would be no danger. They told them there would be no helicopter. They told them there would be no explosions, and all of those things were going on. This became the first time in Hollywood history where a director would be charged due to a fatality on a set. And though everyone involved with the movie would be acquitted of manslaughter, they did end up settling for large sums of money to the families, which of course is not true compensation for the loss of a loved one. John Landis should definitely have been held accountable in a lot more ways than he was. And the fact that he continued to have a directing career after this is kind of insane to me. We've stopped people's entire careers for way less than this. And though this is probably the worst example of, just the people being in charge of these movies making bad decisions that are leading to people being hurt, or in this case, ultimately killed, we've seen before that this is not rare. It's not something that hadn't happened before. These people get into these positions of power and they do things that aren't safe to just get what they want done. There's a big shift towards safety, and it changed the way the unions looked at all of that as well moving forward, and really has helped to really kind of cut down on a lot of this kind of thing happening moving forward. Now, do I personally believe that these movies are cursed? Not really. I think people look and find things where they want to see them. Is there a reason why these movies that are based on, the devil and everything have the most reported incidents? Probably because people are looking for them a lot more. But it doesn't change the fact that, it's kind of fun to look at these stories and try to connect these dots and to make things seem a little more ominous than they might truly be. If you're interested in learning more about cursed movies, I highly recommend the series on Shudder. They've got a whole show, a couple seasons of it, that talk about a bunch of different movies that are considered cursed, and definitely worth checking out. Thanks for checking out this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. It really does help get the word out and help more people find the videos. If you want to support the channel even more, you can head over to Patreon and join Cole and Abel in supporting over there monetarily. Thanks again for stopping by. I'll look forward to talking to you again next time. Bye.